Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Nick Harper from Washington DC, and these are the headlines of the hour. After meeting the UN chief in Moscow, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says that Russia is ready to cooperate with the UN to help civilians in Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry says its missiles have destroyed 6 facilities powering railways used to deliver foreign weapons to Ukrainian forces in the eastern Donbass region. US officials host emergency talks with allies in Germany on supplying Kiev with more weapons for fending off Russia's assault. North Korea will rapidly accelerate the development of its nuclear arsenal, leader Kim Jong-un says while overseeing a vast military parade showcasing his most powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles. 어떤 적이든지 우리 혁명의 고향집군 우리의 빛나는 An explosion rips through a van inside a university campus in southern Pakistan, killing 3 Chinese nationals and their Pakistani driver. Police say a suicide bomber was behind the attack. And Britain says Twitter must be responsible following its purchase by Elon Musk, amid concerns it could overly relax content moderation policies under the billionaire entrepreneur. We start today with the United States hosting a summit with its allies to discuss a new and longer-term goal to defeat Russia. The Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin welcomed the participations from over 40 other countries for emergency talks in a US airbase in Germany. This crucial meeting has been scheduled after the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned of a real risk of a new world war. It's been dubbed as the Ukraine Defense Consultative Group, and the US has vowed to move heaven and earth to help Ukraine win its battle against Russia.
Sir, it's an honor to have you here. And it is an extraordinary gathering with more than 40 countries represented here today. And we're here to help Ukraine win the fight against Russia's unjust invasion and to build up Ukraine's defenses for tomorrow's challenges. Now that visit only underscored my sense of urgency, an urgency that I know that we all share. So I'd like this whole group today to lead with a common and transparent understanding of Ukraine's near-term security requirements, because we're going to keep moving heaven and earth so that we can meet them.
America's long-term goal is not just to win the war, but to defeat Russia so decisively that it will be deterred from launching such an attack ever again, as conveyed by the US Defense Secretary after his trip to Kiev. The US is already the biggest supplier of military aid to Ukraine. At the talks, the German defense minister has also agreed to give the go-ahead to the delivery of used Gepard anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine. The move towards heavy weapon deliveries marks a turning point for Germany's so far more timid backing for Kiev, which has put Chancellor Olaf Scholz under fire at home and abroad. Well, our correspondent Susan Tarani is joining us live now from New York City. Well, Susan, look, the United States is clearly keeping up again its diplomatic push to try and help Ukraine. How important do you feel this meeting has been in Germany?
Right. Again, the United States really showing a unified stance and demonstrating that an extraordinary show of strength, notably with, again, the United States leading this defense meeting at Ramstein Air Base, not really by accident. And also those comments coming from Lloyd Austin. We touched upon it a little bit yesterday, but then we heard again, he talked about America's long-term goals in helping Ukraine, and he ultimately said that it was to weaken Russia. And this is really a departure, despite what this administration says that it has always been its foreign policy goals, but it's a departure of what we've been hearing since the beginning of this war, where it's really right now an offensive stance as opposed to a defensive stance that the United States has been taking in assisting Ukraine, where it sort of waited to see how Vladimir Putin would act, and then it would act in respect to that. And now we're seeing that perhaps, first of all, the United States and its allies may anticipate that this war will be longer than they had anticipated, and second of all, their long-term goal is really to quote-unquote weaken Russia. So definitely a show of strength, of defiance on the one hand from NATO member states, and on the other, we really did hear, I think for the first time, that the goal is for Ukraine to quote-unquote win. Again, something that we really hadn't heard in so many words from the United States in the past month or so.
And Susan, as you mentioned there really is this shift, this idea that it will be a much longer-term conflict than was initially thought. As a result, what more do you think we can expect from the Biden administration when it comes to helping Ukraine over potentially the coming weeks and coming months?
Right, so there's been this commitment of sending more lethal weaponry, more heavy-style weapons that we hadn't seen before. It's the kind of weapons that this administration is sending in right now. There is a cause for concern regarding that, because ultimately that was something that the Biden administration was somewhat holding back on in fear of not provoking Vladimir Putin on the one hand, being cautious, and then on the other hand, we see that this is sort of accelerating, and there are concerns, some members on Capitol Hill, that this might accelerate and maybe turn into an open proxy war. On the other hand, there is an open conversation about how U.S. military personnel outside of Ukraine will be training Ukrainian forces in handling these weapons. And then we also heard that there'll be more sanctions imposed. The European Union is working on a 6th round of sanctions being imposed. But then again, you know, the open question is what happens if this war drags on? These weapons continue to go into Ukraine. These sanctions don't have the effect that they intend to have, then what will be the strategy? And I think that when you ask policymakers and politicians here in the United States, they really don't have an answer to that. They keep saying that, well, we have to exhaust all of these means and then see what we have to do. And I think that's a concerning answer when we get that answer.
Thanks, Susan. That was Susan Tarani joining us live from New York City. Well, next, shifting our focus to Ukraine itself, and at least 5 people have died and 9 others wounded in the northeastern city of Kharkiv. The latest casualties have been attributed to Russian shelling in the city recently. Firefighters were seen battling a blaze in a multi-storey residential building. Rescuers scrambled to assist the residents. At least 2 apartments were severely damaged due to the shelling. Well, Russia has intensified attacks on Kharkiv and surrounding areas in an attempt to try and capture the region. Residential buildings and public infrastructures have been repeatedly targeted to instill fear among the residents there. Meanwhile, frontline workers and rescuers have ramped up the evacuation process to help provide safety to the trapped residents. More than 1,000 people continue to live in the basements without proper water supplies or basic amenities.
Ну, и днем, и ночью, и днем, и ночью. Сначала было как-то, ночами было спокойней, только днем было. А потом начали уже и ночью бухать. У нас тут как бухнуло, сюда прилетело во двор. Да что-то я на кровати подпрыгивал даже. Так это здесь. А оттуда с улицы тоже прилетало. Там вообще и с окна повыносило.
The Russian Defense Ministry, meanwhile, has shared footage of Iskander short-range ballistic missile systems being fired in Ukraine. This comes as Moscow continues to unleash its military power on Ukraine. The ministry said the missiles struck Ukrainian weapons, armoured vehicles and stored ammunition. In the meantime, the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly are set to vote on a resolution to justify the use of the veto in the future. Only the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, that's the United States, China, Russia, France and the UK, hold the power to unilaterally stop an official action, resolution or legislation. Though discussions of veto reform are rare and controversial, they have been revived by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The measure, if passed, could make the permanent Security Council members pay a higher political price when they choose to use their veto powers. The 5 members could have to justify their stance publicly for using the veto. The measure was introduced by Liechtenstein and first proposed more than 2 years ago. The measure proposes for the General Assembly to be convened within 10 working days after someone uses a veto. The Assembly will then hold a debate on the situation as to which the veto was cast. Around 60 countries have joined Liechtenstein in co-sponsoring the reform, including the United States. Britain and France have said they'll vote for the reform, even though they've abstained from co-sponsoring it. Neither Russia nor China were among the sponsors of the text. In addition to Ukraine, both Japan and Germany are also among the co-sponsors of the resolution. Both of those countries are hoping to become permanent members of a potentially enlarged Security Council at some point in the future. Well, next today, Erdogan critic and Turkish philanthropist Osman Kavala has been jailed for life without parole. This comes after he was convicted of trying to overthrow the government by financing protests. 64-year-old Osman Kavala has been jailed for 4.5 years. That had already happened without conviction. He was jailed for his role in the Gezi protests. Those protests began in an Istanbul park in 2013 and snowballed into nationwide anti-government unrest. Kavala played a major role in developing Turkish civil society before he was detained in 2017. The court has also sentenced 7 others to 18 years in jail. People have been arrested for aiding an attempt to overthrow the government. The court was packed with more than 200 people, including members of the opposition, Western diplomats and riot activists. In his last words before the verdict, Kavala said that the imprisonment was based on evidence that is not evidence. He also said the decision amounts to an act of an assassination by the use of the judiciary. Erdogan has linked the Gezi protests to Kurdish militants and he's accused Kavala of trying to overthrow the government. Kavala was acquitted back in 2020 of the charges relating to the Gezi protests, but hours later, another court ordered his arrest on a charge of attempting to overthrow the constitutional order related to the coup attempt. Europe's top court and Western powers say cases against Kavala are politically motivated. The United States says that it's deeply troubled by the conviction of the Turkish activists. The State Department has said that the US is deeply disappointed by the court's decision. Calling the conviction unjust, the US State Department said the decision is inconsistent with respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms and the rule of law. Washington has called for the release of Kavala and all those who, according to the US, have been arbitrarily incarcerated. Ankara is now at risk of being suspended from the Council of Europe rights watchdog. Activists in Turkey are also protesting the move.
Hukuki bir karar olsa yorum yapabilirdik ama değil. Bu AKP iktidarının Gezi döneminden intikamının alamayışının bir özeti, bu sarayın talimatının yerine getiriliş.
Moving on, the popular social media platform Twitter is ready to be sold for billions of dollars. The platform was seen as a game changer for communication globally, but as a business model, the product has been floundering. As Twitter stares at managerial changes, there are questions about the company's direction under one of the world's most eccentric billionaires.
Elon Musk clinched a deal to buy Twitter for $44 billion on Monday in a transaction that will shift control of the social media platform populated by millions of users and global leaders to the world's richest man. The company had adopted a so-called poison pill to resist the billionaire's takeover efforts, but changed course after Musk unveiled a financing package, which includes $33.5 billion from his own fortune. Daniel Ives is managing director at Wedbush Securities.
I think there were two issues that really changed the board's mind to do a U-turn on the Musk bid. One was the financing. Once Musk outlined the financing, that really was the clock striking 12 for the board, put their feet to the fire. And second was no other bidder coming. Once another bidder did not come, they were at the altar, but no one came. That's why they called back Musk.
Musk, an active Twitter user with more than 83 million followers, has said Twitter needs to be taken private to grow and become a genuine platform for free speech.
I think Musk likely becomes chairman, not CEO, takes historical social media experience, people that come into Twitter, make it a subscription model, probably a paid subscription model, increase cash flow. There will clearly be changes from a constriction in what people could say. And that's going to be a tight wire act, especially in this environment. But ultimately, taking private is going to have a lot of changes for Twitter. But Musk just bet 20% of his net worth on Twitter. It's not just about freedom of speech.
Many Republicans welcomed news of the sale and called on Musk to return former President Donald Trump to the social media platform. Shares of Twitter jumped as high as 6.5% on Monday to above $52, but still below Musk's offer of $54.20 per share.
Well, next today, the Hollywood star Johnny Depp has concluded his testimony in the defamation trial against Amber Heard in a court in the US state of Virginia. And this is what happened on the fourth day on the stand.
I was at the end. I was broken.
Actor Johnny Depp concluded his testimony on Monday in the defamation case he filed against ex-wife Amber Heard.
Of course, there have been negative stories.
On Depp's fourth day on the witness stand in a Virginia court, Heard's attorneys showed the jury news articles that they said had damaged Depp's career.
Entitled, "Apparently Drunk Johnny Depp Cut Off at Hollywood Film Awards Ceremony."
Well before the December 2018 opinion piece in the Washington Post, in which Heard said she was a survivor of domestic abuse.
The next article, also from May 10th, 2017, a year and a half before the op-ed was published, says Johnny Depp reportedly drank heavily and was constantly late on the new Pirates movie set. Did I read that right?
You did, reportedly.
The next article, also from May 10th, 2017.
Mr. Depp, this is a pathetic attempt.
Mr. Depp, please just respond to the question that I'm asking you.
What's your
question?
The next question,
the next document.
Depp said he never struck Heard or any woman.
The only person that I have ever abused in my life is myself.
He said Heard's allegations cost him everything. Depp was dropped from the Fantastic Beasts film franchise, and a new Pirates of the Caribbean movie was put on hold. On Monday, Depp said Disney presumed he was guilty until proven innocent, adding that he planned to continue with Pirates of the Caribbean until it was time to stop.
Captain Jack Sparrow was a character that I had built from the ground up. My feeling was that these characters should be able to have their proper goodbye, as it were.
Depp concluded his testimony on Monday saying he was the victim of domestic violence in their relationship and was broken by the time their marriage fell apart. His attorneys played audio from a conversation that took place after Heard had secured a restraining order against him in 2016.
Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and yes. I know it's a fair fight.
In the recording, Depp proposed the couple issue a joint letter saying they loved each other and the media had created a storm around them. The suggestion was an attempt to find a peaceful settlement, according to Depp.
Well, when they were young, Cuban surfers would turn school desks into surfboards to ride the waves. That time has long since gone. Now the surfers have proper equipment and acceptance among the people. The Olympic Committee's decision to include surfing as an Olympic sport has also helped Cuban surfers to overcome police harassment in the communist-ruled nation.
Surfing enthusiasts stroll around the streets in the fishing community of Santa Fe to the west of Havana with their surfboards in tow. These streets are what separate them from the sea. They are always on the lookout for weather patterns that bring high tides.
Here, generally speaking, we depend 100% on weather events, such as cold fronts and hurricanes, which are the ones that cause the swell here. So that is why the season begins in the winter, when the cold fronts that bring the swell start to come in.
Their main amusement spot is the ruins of an old rock pool. Allegedly, the pool once belonged to a bourgeois owner called Antolin. This was before the 1959 revolution brought Fidel Castro to power. This area has now become a promontory which is used by surfers to launch themselves into the water. Surfing reminds them of their childhood and the journey that has gotten them here.
I have been surfing for a long time. We started with a playbow from a table. We modified it and made some fins and surfed any wave and so on until I got my board when I was 29 years old.
Surfing was not always a respected sport in the country. Some even say that their boards were confiscated. Others say that they had to swim away from the police. But things are starting to look up. And that is because surfing made its Olympic debut at the Tokyo Games in 2021. And since then, Cuba's authorities have started recognizing it as a sport.
It wasn't really underground. What happened is that the sport was practiced and it didn't really receive any attention from the National Institute. The sports system, that is the Cuban Ministry of Sport, which is not new either, has already taken steps towards the recognition and possible development of surfing.
Since last year, Inder has been in contact with the International Surfing Association. They have also made plans to welcome a delegation from the global governing body in the coming months. Cuba is now firm in its intent to support the sport. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Finally today, there's a clean, well-lit cafe in western Tokyo which boasts itself as an anti-procrastination cafe. We leave you to find out more about this unique venue. I'm Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Thanks, as always, for watching.
blog post today. My goal is to deliver 3 blog articles, and I'll do my best to achieve that.
The cafe went viral on social media, and people are saying that the rules are scary or that it feels like you're being watched from behind. But actually, instead of monitoring customers, I'm here to support them. I would like everyone to finish their work. Since people can get their job done faster and concentrate more on writing here than in other cafes or at home, they can finish their work early. As a result, what they thought would take a day was actually only completed in 3 hours, or the tasks that usually take 3 hours were done in 1 hour at this cafe. This is the kind of experience I want to provide for customers.
There are many other. This is right, Arab.